Some truths, even when wrapped in love, can become sharp blades that sever every bond. My life is a testament to that. I lied to protect her, and lost her because of those very lies. Hey everyone, Robert here, and it's great to connect with you again in this quiet space. How's work been lately, and are you taking care of yourself? I always hope for peace and well-being for all who are listening. Today I'm not here to tell you a fairy tale or a romantic ballad, but a genuine slice from my own life. It's a story that, while not filled with sensational plot twists like a movie, holds deep secrets and silent mistakes that perhaps some of us have experienced. Join me as we listen in the stillness of the night to my own unfinished love song, where every sigh, every moment of quiet is filled with things left unsaid. I still remember that moment, as if it happened just this morning. Every small detail remains etched in my mind, brutally sharp. She stood right outside my study door holding the mint green denim jacket I'd given her for our 3rd anniversary. Her eyes were red and swollen, but no tears fell, not a single drop. The emptiness in her gaze was more terrifying than any tear. It was a look devoid of hope, of expectation, leaving only silent acceptance. I said, "I'm sorry." My voice was lost, hoarse, as if the sounds were choked in my throat. I wanted to say more, to explain, to beg, but no words escaped. She just shook her head, a light, decisive shake, as if she had told herself 1,000 times that this was what she had to do. And then she walked away. Not a word. No reproach. No yelling, no asking why, just silence. A heavy, suffocating silence that enveloped the room, enveloped my entire life. And I stood there, frozen, with that strange feeling in my heart, not intense pain, but an ultimate emptiness, as if a large hole had just been carved deep into my chest, draining all emotions, all breath. I didn't lie out of betrayal. There was no other person, no secret affairs. I lied because I loved her. Sounds paradoxical, doesn't it? A twisted, painful, and incredibly hard to accept truth. But it was the truth. I hid the times I got fired, not because I was lazy or incompetent, but because the companies I worked for went bankrupt, or because I wasn't strong enough to adapt to the harsh market changes. I was afraid she would worry, afraid she would think I was a failure. I hid the mounting credit card debt, my mother's medical bills I couldn't afford, not because I gambled or squandered money, but because I borrowed to help my mother get treatment so she could live a few more years without enduring pain. I wanted to bear it alone, to prove I was a strong man, a dutiful son, a responsible husband. And I hid the depression that was slowly gnawing at my soul, bit by bit. The sleepless nights, the mornings I didn't want to wake up, the invisible fears, because I didn't want her to worry, didn't want her to see a weak, broken version of me. I kept thinking, if I could protect her from every burden, every sorrow, every pressure of life, she would be happy. She would forever be the radiant flower I loved. But I was wrong. Cruelly wrong. I didn't understand that happiness isn't the absence of burdens, but the act of sharing them together. I don't know when she discovered my lies. Maybe it was when she checked the bank account and saw unexplained payments, frightening negative numbers, or when she saw me sitting silently in front of the computer for hours, doing nothing, just staring blankly at the screen. Or maybe it was when I said, "I'm fine." For the 100th time, my eyes red, my lips trembling, and my smile painfully distorted. She knew. She always knew. She was just waiting for me to be honest, waiting for me to open up, waiting for me to utter the weakest words, waiting for me to say, "I need you, I'm not okay," but I never dared. A man's pride, the fear of being seen as a failure, kept me trapped in the cage of lies. We still had dinner together, still watched Netflix on weekends, still drove our child to school, still maintained a facade of a perfect family in front of everyone. But between us, there was something unnameable, a distance that kept stretching like a rubber band pulled too far, until at some point it would snap. I saw her look at me, as if she was trying to read a book that had been smudged, a book whose every word she once knew by heart. Her eyes held scrutiny, disappointment, and even a touch of sorrow. And I didn't dare to look back. I was afraid that if I looked into her eyes, I would crumble, would no longer be able to maintain my perfect facade. She didn't slam the door, didn't carry a large suitcase. There was no crashing sound. Just a small handbag, a few simple clothes, and a handwritten note placed on the table next to her wedding ring. "I waited for you to be honest. I don't need a perfect man, Robert. I just need a man brave enough to say, 'I need you.' But you chose silence. And now so do I." I read the note over and over. My hands trembled. My eyes blurred, hot tears streamed down my cheeks. Not because she left, but because I let her leave without knowing I had already pushed her away long ago. I had single-handedly destroyed my happiness with lies wrapped in love. I wish I had said, "I'm scared. I feel like a failure. I don't want to disappoint you." I just want to keep you safe. But there are no what-ifs in real life. Now I whisper those words, to the empty space every night, to the loneliness gnawing at my soul. I don't blame her. I no longer blame myself either. I learned to forgive, little by little. I learned to accept my own weaknesses, to accept that I'm not a superhero who can carry everything alone. I started writing, not for anyone, just to not keep everything inside so those chaotic emotions could find an outlet. I learned to breathe, to cry, to live again, without pretending to be okay. If you're listening to this, maybe you've also lost someone. Not because of betrayal, not because of arguments, but simply because of things left unsaid. I want you to know, you're not alone. And if there's still a chance, don't choose silence as I once did. Whisper, I need you. I'm scared. I'm not okay, but I want to try. Sometimes, the truth doesn't break love. It's the silence that does. I still remember the first days I met Melissa. Her smile was as radiant as the morning sun. Her eyes sparkled as if they held 1,000 stars. She was an architecture student, and I was a young man full of ambition with dreams of becoming a successful financial manager. We met in a small coffee shop near campus when we were both engrossed in drawings and books. She asked me about the economics book I was reading, and from there the conversations flowed endlessly. Our love blossomed naturally, gently like a symphony. We spent hours talking about the future, about a small house with a garden full of roses, about adorable children, and about the big dreams we would build together. Melissa trusted me implicitly, and so did I. I promised myself I would give her a fulfilling life, a stable shoulder for her to freely pursue her architectural passion. We got married on a warm, sunny afternoon. I can still clearly picture Melissa's happy smile in her pristine white dress, her eyes sparkling as she vowed to be by my side forever. At that moment, I believed we were destiny, two perfect pieces of an eternally happy picture. Our married life was initially as calm as a stream. I had a fairly stable job at a financial company while Melissa began her career as an architect. 2 years later, Ava, our precious little daughter, was born. She inherited her mother's cheerful smile and my expressive eyes. Every time I looked at her, I became even more determined to do my best to provide our family with a prosperous life free from financial worries. I wanted to be a successful man, the pride of my wife and child. But life isn't always a bed of roses. The first discordant notes began to appear silently, subtly, like a tiny crack on a solid wall. The financial company where I worked began to struggle. The market was volatile and projects failed repeatedly. I had to work day and night, but my salary still wasn't enough to cover the growing bills. At the same time, my mother was diagnosed with a serious illness. The doctor diagnosed her with chronic heart failure, a condition requiring complex surgery and significant costs for medication and rehabilitation. The expensive medical bills weighed heavily on my shoulders like a mountain. I spent a lot of time in the hospital with my mother, witnessing her struggle with pain and exhaustion. My heart ached seeing my mother slowly weaken, but I didn't dare tell Melissa about the true financial burden. I tried to manage in every way possible, borrowing from friends and colleagues, draining all my savings, but it still wasn't enough. I started looking for a new job, hoping to find a better place with a higher salary. I was accepted into a new company with promises of a bright future. I told Melissa about it, my face radiant, trying to hide the deep anxiety within. That's when the first lies sprouted. That new company wasn't as good as I imagined. Initially, I worked very hard, but after a few months, I realized it was an unprofessional company with risky investments and poor management. My salary was cut, then delayed. One day, I was laid off. I came home holding the termination letter in my hand, feeling like my whole world was collapsing. I watched Melissa playing with Ava in the living room, their laughter clear and carefree. My heart ached. How could I tell her I was unemployed again? How could I tell her I was a failure again, unable to support my family? In that moment, a thought flashed through my mind, a thought I later knew was a fatal mistake. I decided to keep it a secret. I would lie. I would pretend I was still working, still earning money. I would find another job quickly before she found out. It was a small lie, but it opened the door to a chain of larger, more complex lies. I started borrowing on credit cards to cover living expenses, to continue my mother's medical treatment, to keep our house sparkling, so Melissa could still buy the clothes she loved, so Ava could still go to the best preschool. The debt piled up like a snowball, rolling downhill, growing larger and faster. At the same time, the relentless pressure and anxiety pushed me into a state of depression. I began to feel perpetually exhausted, lacking energy, uninterested in anything. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to talk to anyone, but I still had to pretend. Pretend to be a happy husband, a cheerful father, a strong, resilient man. I was afraid she would worry, afraid she would feel burdened, afraid she would leave me if she knew my true self. I kept thinking that was how I loved her, how I protected her from the darkness of my life. I was wrong. My lies escalated continuously from small matters about work to larger financial problems. I gradually became a master artist in concealing the truth. Every morning I would still dress in a suit, carry my briefcase to work as usual, but in reality I spent my time job hunting or wandering in parks, public libraries, trying to figure out how to solve the colossal debt. I created a false world around me to maintain a semblance of stability. I talked about new projects at my new company, important meetings that extended late into the night, sudden business trips. I even sent myself work emails creating fake calls so Melissa would believe I was still working. I was confident that I was doing everything perfectly, not leaving any loopholes. But little did I know that a woman's love and intuition are sometimes sharper than a detective's. Melissa began to sense the difference. Her eyes were no longer as carefree as before. She started looking at me with a scrutinizing gaze, as if trying to find something hidden behind my forced smile. She asked about my work, more often asked about the colleagues I worked with. I tried to answer confidently, but sometimes I noticed my voice trembled slightly and my eyes avoided hers. Once she found a credit card statement in my jacket pocket with huge debt figures I had tried to hide. I concocted a story about helping a friend in need, and she believed me though. A hint of doubt still flickered in her eyes. Some nights I saw her stay up late, sitting quietly by the window looking out into the darkness. I didn't know what she was thinking, but I felt an invisible sadness enveloping her. Our daily lives continued steadily. We still had dinner together, watched Netflix on weekends, drove Ava to school. But between us was an invisible distance that kept stretching. My stories became more superficial, my emotions more suppressed. I dared not share any difficulties, dared not show my weakness. Melissa also gradually spoke less. She no longer asked me about work. She no longer tried to strike up conversations when I came home. We lived next to each other, but our souls were miles apart. Sometimes I saw her look at me with pained eyes, as if trying to read a smudged book, a book whose every word she once knew by heart. She tried to reach out to me with gentle hugs, caring inquiries, but I pushed her away with silence, with meaningless "I'm fines." A sense of loneliness gnawed at both of us in our own home. I was lonely in my lies, lonely with the burden on my shoulders. She was lonely in her waiting and her disappointment at not being able to reach my true self. I realized that my silence had become a thick wall separating us. I tried everything to compensate, to prove my love. I bought Melissa expensive gifts, took her on trips, took Ava to the park, but material gifts couldn't fill the void in our souls. I could buy luxuries, but I couldn't buy back lost trust, couldn't buy back the sincerity I had lost. Every time Melissa asked me about our family finances, I would make convoluted excuses, blaming the difficult economic situation or investments that hadn't yet yielded returns. I was confident in my ability to deceive, believing she would never discover the horrifying truth. Little did I know that every lie I told wasn't a protective shield, but a small knife cutting into the bond between us, making it increasingly fragile and weak. And then the thread snapped. Gently, yet decisively. Melissa had tried very hard to break down the wall of silence I had built. I realized that now, when it's too late. She often asked open-ended questions, questions that required a deeper answer than "I'm fine" or "it's nothing." She asked me about my feelings, about my dreams, about the fears I might be facing. "Do you want to talk, Robert? I'm here." Her voice was gentle, full of concern. But I, in the cocoon of my fear and pride, pushed her away. I just offered a forced smile, saying I was tired from work, that I needed quiet. She tried to take me on romantic dates like the early days of our love. She wore my favorite dress, applied light makeup, and her eyes still sparkled with hope. But I, with my mind heavy with burdens and lies, couldn't truly be present. I just pretended to be happy, tried to laugh and talk, but my smile was distorted and my eyes were empty. She noticed it, and the disappointment in her eyes grew. Sometimes I'd see Melissa place her hand on mine when we watched movies, or gently stroke my hair when I pretended to be asleep on the sofa. These were light touches, full of love and a desire to connect. But I, in my constant anxiety about being discovered, unconsciously recoiled. I was afraid that intimacy would force me to reveal the truth, would expose the cracks in my soul. My changes also directly affected Ava. She used to be very attached to me, but gradually I noticed Ava seeking me out less. She often asked Melissa, "Is Daddy okay, Mom? Why doesn't Daddy smile much?" Melissa would just gently stroke her head, saying Daddy was busy with work. I heard those words and my heart tightened. I had not only hurt Melissa, but also my own daughter. I had stolen a part of her innocent childhood, replacing it with vague worry. I was too preoccupied with building a false image of a successful man and forgot the true foundation of happiness, honesty and sharing. I was too confident in my ability to conceal, believing I could single-handedly bear everything and protect my loved ones from the truth. But I was wrong. I had turned love into a cage and lies into its bars. And then one day I realized that Melissa no longer asked me about my work. She no longer tried to approach me with loving gestures. Her patience had run out. She had given up. Not with an argument or harsh words, but with an absolute silence, a painful acceptance. I saw her transformation. From a woman full of energy and hope, Melissa became calmer, her eyes often distant, holding a deep sadness. She still managed all the housework, still took perfect care of Ava, but her smile was no longer as radiant as before. Her laughter also faded. She was no longer fighting. And that was the most terrifying sign. The climax of discovery wasn't a big argument, not a dramatic accusation. It was simply scattered pieces suddenly fitting together perfectly, forming a terrifying picture in Melissa's mind. I don't know the exact moment she realized everything. I only know that the truth was exposed. Perhaps it was that night when I was tossing and turning in bed, unable to sleep because of thoughts of new debt. I saw Melissa get up. She hadn't slept for many nights, I knew. She walked straight to my desk. I heard the gentle click of the keyboard. She wasn't trying to be stealthy, but I didn't dare to move. I nin tho lang ngay tung ting dong. I knew she was checking my bank account. I knew she was looking for what I had tried to hide. My heart pounded in my chest. I wanted to stop her, wanted to explain, but my body felt frozen. I closed my eyes, feeling immense shame and ultimate despair. The next morning, I woke up, the room eerily quiet. Melissa had prepared breakfast for Ava and taken her to school as usual. I went down to the kitchen, saw her washing dishes, her back lonely and thin. I saw a different look in her eyes when she turned to look at me. A look of disappointment, deep hurt, and even a hint of coldness. There was no accusation, no shouting. I knew she knew everything. My entire perfect facade had crumbled uncontrollably. I felt ultimate fear, a fear not of being reproached, but of losing the trust of the woman I loved most. That afternoon, when Ava was at a friend's house, I was sitting in my study trying to figure out how to manage new debt. I heard Melissa's soft footsteps stop outside the door. Anh Gang Do Len, cô ấy đừng đỏ tay cầm chiếc áo khoác denim màu bạc, hà đôi mắt đỏ hoe sưng húp, nhưng không một giọt nước mắt nào rơi. Her silence was more terrifying than any accusation. I'm sorry, I said, my voice dry, lost. I wanted to say more, to explain my fear, the burdens I had tried to hide. I wanted to talk about my love for her, that all those lies stemmed from a desire to protect her. But no words escaped. The regret and pain were too overwhelming, choking my throat. She just shook her head. A gentle but decisive shake, as if she had told herself 1,000 times that this was what she had to do. It wasn't a shake of anger, but a shake of ultimate disappointment. She had waited. Waited for me to be honest. Waited for me to open up. But I had never been able to. And then she walked away. Not a word. No reproach. No yelling. No asking why. Just silence. A heavy, suffocating silence that enveloped the room, enveloped my entire life. I heard the soft click of the door closing, the footsteps fading away. I stood there frozen, with that strange feeling in my heart, not intense pain, but an ultimate emptiness, as if a large hole had just been carved deep into my chest, draining all emotions, all breath. I found her handwritten note on my desk next to her wedding ring. I picked it up, my hands trembling. I waited for you to be honest, Robert. I don't need a perfect man. I don't need a man who never fails. I just need a man brave enough to say, I need you, strong enough to say, I'm scared, sincere enough to say, I'm not okay, but I want to try with you. But you chose silence. You chose to build a wall of lies. And now so do I. I will be silent, so you can face what you have chosen. I don't blame you. I only blame myself for not being patient enough to wait for you to speak. I will leave to give you space to find yourself again, to find the truth. I will never forget you. But I also cannot live forever in deceit. I read the note over and over. My hands trembled. My eyes blurred, hot tears streamed down my cheeks. Not because she left, but because I let her leave without knowing I had already pushed her away long ago. I had single-handedly destroyed my happiness with lies wrapped in love. I wish I had said, I'm scared, Melissa. I feel like a failure. I don't want to disappoint you. I just want to keep you safe. But I was wrong. I need you. I can't do this alone. But there are no what-ifs in real life. Now I whisper those words to the empty space every night, to the loneliness gnawing at my soul. Regret is like a sharp blade cutting deep into my heart relentlessly. Time passed slowly and painfully. The emptiness within me did not diminish. It grew even larger. Every corner of the house, every object reminded me of Melissa, of the happy memories I had single-handedly destroyed. Initially, I sank into despair. I didn't eat, I didn't sleep. I just sat silently in my study staring at the wall trying to find meaning in life again. I blamed myself, blamed my weakness, my blind pride that made me lose the woman I loved most. But then one morning as the sunlight streamed through the crack in the door, I saw old photos of Melissa and me, photos of Ava when she was little smiling brightly. I realized that I couldn't keep dwelling in this regret. I had to live on not for myself, but for Ava, for what Melissa had hoped I would become. I began the recovery process little by little, slowly and with great difficulty. The first thing I did was confront my financial reality. I sought help from a financial advisor, Michael. He was an older man, kind, but with sharp eyes and experience. When I told him about my situation, he didn't judge. He simply said gently, "Young man, everyone stumbles sometimes. What matters is how you get back up." He helped me create a detailed debt repayment plan step by step, starting with the smallest amounts. I accepted every job I could, no matter how small or lowly. From working extra shifts at a coffee shop in the morning to tutoring students in the evening or working as a delivery driver on weekends. I was no longer afraid of people's gazes, no longer afraid of being seen as a failure. Every dollar earned through honest labor brought me a sense of relief, a small sense of pride. I no longer had to lie about my income. The truth, no matter how humble, was 1,000 times better than a glamorous lie. I also sought help for my depression. I went to see a therapist, Dr. Emily. Dr. Emily was a middle-aged woman with a warm voice and empathetic eyes. In our sessions, I laid everything bare: the lies, the fear of being judged, the loneliness of carrying the burden alone. Dr. Emily listened patiently without judgment. She helped me realize that suppressing emotions trying to appear perfect only hurts oneself and those around them. She taught me breathing techniques to calm panic attacks, how to accept negative emotions instead of suppressing them. I started writing, not for anyone, just to not keep everything inside. I bought an old leather-bound journal, and every night I wrote in it. I wrote about my feelings, about my regret, about my unfinished dreams, about the things I wanted to tell Melissa but never had the opportunity. I wrote about our happy moments and also the painful ones. Writing became a form of therapy, helping me organize my thoughts, confront the hidden corners of my soul. It was like a small river slowly washing away the sediment, the heaviness within me. I learned to breathe deeply, slowly, to feel life still flowing within me, to listen to the beat of my own heart. I learned to cry. I no longer suppressed my tears. I allowed myself to be weak, to be sad, to be regretful. Those tears were like a cleansing stream, washing away the burdens, the pains that had accumulated for so long. They weren't a sign of weakness, but of release, the first step towards healing. I learned to live again, without pretending to be okay. I learned to accept my true self with all my strengths and weaknesses. I no longer had to wear a mask every day. I learned to share my emotions with Ava, even though she was still young. I told her about my difficulties at work, about times when I felt sad, but I also always emphasized that I would try to overcome them for her. I wanted Ava to grow up honest and brave, not afraid to express her feelings, and to know that her dad wasn't always perfect, but he always loved her and tried his best. Ava also seemed to sense the positive change in me. She started smiling more, her eyes becoming clearer. Some evenings after I read her a story, Ava would hug me tightly and say, "You're my superhero, Daddy." Those innocent words melted my heart. I knew I still had a long way to go, but Ava's smile and her trust were the biggest motivation for me to keep trying. My mother, although her condition was still serious and required frequent treatment, had gradually stabilized thanks to my dedicated care and the doctor's support. I had been honest with her about my financial situation, and she hugged me, saying she was proud of my courage in facing the truth. Not having to hide anything anymore helped my mother and me grow much closer. Some evenings after Ava was sound asleep, I would often sit by my mother's bed, telling her about what had happened, about the emotions I was going through. She didn't say much, just gently stroked my head, and those touches brought me a strange peace. Although the financial burden remained, sharing and receiving empathy from my mother helped alleviate a lot of pressure. Occasionally, I would accidentally catch a familiar scent, an old melody, or a fleeting image that reminded me of Melissa. Those moments still made my heart ache. The regret was still there, like a deep scar in my soul. It never completely disappeared, but it was no longer an open wound, no longer causing intense pain. Instead, it became a reminder that sincerity, no matter how difficult, is the strongest foundation for any relationship. I learned that happiness isn't about hiding fears, but about sharing them with the one you love. I learned that sometimes weakness is the greatest strength because it allows us to truly connect with those around us. After Melissa left, we were no longer husband and wife on paper. I no longer concealed this truth. The divorce process was quite quick and quiet, without fuss or dispute. Melissa didn't ask for anything regarding assets or alimony. She simply wanted to be free from what she considered a life of deceit. For her, my inability to be honest was an unhealable wound. I accepted all conditions because I knew I was wrong, and I wanted to give her the freedom she sought. Signing the divorce papers was one of the heaviest moments of my life, a painful acceptance that I had truly lost everything. After the divorce, I still regularly brought Ava to visit Melissa. Although we were no longer married, we tried to maintain a friendly relationship because Ava deserved to have both her parents. Those initial meetings were very awkward. We made small talk mostly about our daughter. I still saw a distance in Melissa's eyes, an invisible wall she had built to protect herself. Although it pained me, I understood and respected that. I didn't expect immediate forgiveness. I just wanted to prove that I was changing not for her, but because I wanted to become a better version of myself. I don't know if Melissa and I will ever be able to reconcile. Perhaps not, but I still hold a fragile ray of hope. Hope that one day she will understand that everything I did came from love, even if it was a blind and misguided love. Hope that she will forgive me and herself. I still look at her wedding ring on my desk like a permanent reminder of the lesson I learned about the price of silence and the importance of honesty. Every night before I go to sleep, I still whisper the words I never dared to say to Melissa when she was still by my side. I need you, Melissa. I'm scared. I'm not okay, but I want to try. Sometimes, the truth doesn't break love. It's the silence that does. My story ends here. If this story touched your heart, or if you have different thoughts on the choices I had to face, please don't hesitate to leave a comment below. Every opinion you share is a valuable contribution, helping me and others see life from many different angles. Let's share our stories and the lessons we've learned to grow stronger together. And if you found this story meaningful, please help me spread its message by liking this video and sharing it with anyone you think needs to hear it. Your support is a huge motivation for me to continue sharing more stories, more hard-won lessons from life. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on my latest videos full of emotional life stories, revealed secrets, and profound insights. Thank you all for listening. I wish you all happiness and peace, and always cherish the truth in your lives. Goodbye for now.